Welcome, dear students. Let us continue from where we had stopped. We are at page 19 when Bruno was in conversation with Maria, their house help. And after a long silence, he said, "What do you think of all this, Maria?" He asked after a long silence because he had always liked Maria and felt as if she was one of the family. So he kept quiet for a long time because he did not know how to express his feelings and to let her know what he was thinking. So, after a long pause, he spoke out and said, "What did she think of all that?" Do you understand? All that by meaning all this, he meant to say the entire act of the family having to shift to that new house that they had arrived at that point of time. And he always felt that Maria was a trustworthy person, a kind person, and she was one of the family members, and he could share all his feelings, his fears, his insecurities, and all that he thought. All what? She asked, and Maria repeated the same word all, and along with that, she used what and framed a question in reply to what Bruno had said. And she said so, all what, intending, trying to get and understand the meaning of what Bruno was trying to tell her. Do you understand? She meant to get a clarification. 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 She wanted him to clearly explain to her what he tried to mean by using the word all. This he said as if it was the most obvious thing in the world, and to this little boy, he thought that Maria was wise enough to understand very clearly the entire thing what he was referring to. This he said, this intending to mean the entire affair of having come there. And he felt that Maria, as a wise person, should have clearly understood by then what he was meaning to say, and that it should have been, according to him, that it should have been the most easiest thing for any person of her ability to understand that. Coming to a place like this, he said, "Don't you think we've made a big mistake?" And he questioned her and he explained to her that his family having to come there, and having come there, did not she think that it was the biggest mistake that his family had committed? Don't you think we've made a big mistake? He wanted her opinion and thoughts on that. "That's not for me to say," said Maria. "Your mother has explained to you about your father's job." And before she could continue with her speech, he spoke out. So she said, like a good maid servant, she said that she had no authority to comment on what he was saying, and that was not for her to decide or say anything on. And she told him and she reminded him that his mother had already explained to him the importance of his father's job to the family. And before she could continue and end her speech, Bruno spoke in between. "Oh, I'm tired of hearing about father's job," said Bruno, interrupting her. "That's all we ever hear about. If you ask me," he said again, he said, "Oh, I am tired of hearing about father's job," said Bruno, interrupting her. "That's all we ever hear about. If you ask me, father's job this and father's job that." Well, if father's job means that we have to move away from a house and the sliding banister and my three best friends for life, then I think father should think twice about his job, don't you? So he expressed his frustration, anger, and his sadness. Frustration. Frustration means he was unable to get his mother to do what he was intending her to do for him. So he was frustrated, he was angry, and he was not getting what he wanted. Therefore, he stopped her and he expressed his disappointment hearing about his father's job all the time. And he said that there was nothing else that people talked about in that house except for the only thing that they spoke was how important his father's job was. And that is why he said father's job this and father's job that. That means he was meaning to say that people all around him just talked how important his father's job was for the family and nothing else. Well, he said if it was so important, if his father's job was so important, that they had to move away from their old home in Berlin and get away from the sliding banister and his three best friends for life, then I think, he said, then he thought that his father should reconsider. Think twice means reconsider about his job, don't you? And he asked for her opinion as well. What did she think? He said that if father's job meant that they would have to move away from their old home in Berlin and away from the sliding banister which he and his friends used to play on, and if his father's job meant that they would have to leave behind Berlin, he leave behind his friends, then in that case he thought as a little boy his father should rethink on his decision that he had made and he should reconsider his decision. And he asked for her opinion on the same, wanting to know what she thought of it. Just at that moment, there was a creak outside in the hallway, and Bruno looked up to see the door of mother and father's room opening slightly. He froze, unable to move for a moment. Mother was still downstairs, which meant that father was in there and he might have heard everything that Bruno had just said. So, at that very moment when he was expressing his disappointment, when he was expressing his anger, and when he was expressing his intentions that his father should reconsider his decision of having come there, complaining in other words to Maria and wanting to know her opinion on that, he thought that his father must have heard him say all that when The door outside in the hallway creaked open slightly, and he thought that it could be nobody else except his father, because his mother he had left downstairs. So, when he heard the sound, he froze, unable. So, he was absolutely frightened. That is why he froze. You understand? He was perturbed, he was disturbed, and he felt absolutely frightened. So, he froze, not knowing what to do, unable to move for a moment. He was almost paralyzed with fear. Mother was still downstairs. According to him, he had left his mother downstairs, so he thought that his mother was still downstairs. The only person who could have been in the other room was his father, which meant father was in there, and he might have heard everything that Bruno had just said. He must have heard everything, according to Bruno, that he had said to Maria, complaining about his decision and how big a mistake it was to have come there, and that he should reconsider, change his mind, and go back to Berlin. He watched the door, hardly daring to breathe, so he did not have the courage. Hardly daring to breathe means he did not even have the courage to breathe. Wondering, thinking, wondering means thinking whether father might come through the door and take him downstairs for a serious talking to. He was thinking that his father must have heard everything, and he would come out and he would take him down, and in the presence of his mother, he would give him a sound scolding. Do you understand, gentlemen? So, on the next page, on page 20, the door opened wider and Bruno stepped back as a figure appeared, but it wasn't father. So, when the door opened wider, Bruno stepped back a little bit because he was afraid that his father would emerge out of the room, and to his astonishment, a figure appeared, but it wasn't his father. What a relief it must have been for this little boy. It was a much younger man and not as tall as his father. It was not his father, he noticed. The man wasn't as tall as his father, and the man was much more younger compared to his father. But he realized that he wore the same type of uniform as his father, only without as many decorations on it, without as many medals on it. That is the meaning of decorations on it. And he realized that it wasn't his father, but he wore the same kind of uniform with lesser medals on his uniform. He was carrying a box in his hands and walking towards the staircase. And this man had a box in his hands, and he walked towards the staircase, moving down. He gave Bruno a quick nod, shaking his head as if to greet him, and continued on his way and continued to do what he was doing on his way down the stairs and out. "Who is that?" asked Bruno. The young man had seemed so serious and busy that he assumed he must be someone very important. So, according to Bruno, the way the man behaved, and in that serious manner and that air of being occupied, he now wanted to know who this man was, and he assumed means he took it to be, he understood as he understood, meaning he took it to be that he must be someone very important. And how did he come to understand that he was someone important? The way in which the man behaved. He behaved in a very serious manner, in a very busy manner. He was busy and serious, so he thought that he was someone very important to have come to visit his father. One of your father's soldiers, I suppose, said Maria. We'll get to know them in time. And Maria told him that he was one of his father's subordinates, a junior officer, subordinates. He was his junior officer, and soon they would get to know all these people around in that new place. I don't think I like him, said Bruno. He was too serious. I don't even think there's going to be anyone to play with other than Gretel, and what fun is that after all? She's a hopeless case. And he was disappointed that this new person that he had seen in the place, expecting and hoping that he would find someone happier compared to the others, a person to play with him, talk to him. But there he was, serious looking and busy. He said that he did not like the person because he seemed to be too serious, and he was disappointed that uh, he was not going to have anyone to play with. He would have no playmates in that place except for his sister Gretel, and he considered her no fun to play with, and he called her a hopeless case. A hopeless case means someone who was useless and someone who he did not enjoy playing with. You understand? Someone who was incapable of understanding him and uh, sharing a game together. He felt as if he was about to cry. You understand? So he felt absolutely sad and down, low in spirit. He felt as if he was about to cry and he was almost in tears, but stopped himself because that would make him look weak, and Maria would not enjoy seeing him weep. So he stopped himself. He looked around the room without fully lifting his eyes up from the ground, trying to see whether there was anything of interest to be found. And he did not lift his eyes. Instead, he looked all around from the corners of his eyes, trying to find if there was anything of interest that he could find to engage in. There wasn't anything that intrigued him. Intrigued, intrigued. That means there was nothing that caused any kind of curiosity. There was nothing curious about the place, and uh, there wasn't, or there didn't seem to be, or to him it did not seem that there was anything of interest and to his liking. But then one thing caught his eye. There was something that caught his eye as he was looking around, still with his head down and his eyes facing the floor. Over in the corner of the room opposite the door, there was a window in the ceiling that stretched down into the hall, and he noticed over in the corner of the room opposite the door, where the door was, there was a window in the ceiling, right on top in the ceiling, that stretched, that came down, that moved down into the wall. So it clearly suggests that most probably they were in an attic. ATTIC. Attic means a small room between the roof and the ceiling, gentlemen. And so he noticed that. He walked slowly towards it. He moved towards it. He lifted himself up and he moved towards it, hoping that from that little window he might be able to see all the way back to Berlin, which he had left behind, and his house, the house that he had grown up in, and the streets around it, and the tables where people sat and told each other hilarious stories. Stories means extremely funny stories. So he hoped in his uh, childishness, as an innocent little boy of 9 years, he thought that he could see right through the window, right across to Berlin, watch uh, all those streets, all those happy people, all those friendly people, all those sharing people, and see them at the tables, sitting and chatting with each other and telling each other happy, funny, extremely funny to be precise, stories. That is the meaning of hilarious. So his heart longed to see and return back to Berlin. He wasn't very happy. He was missing his friends. He was missing the life back in Berlin. He wanted people to be happy. He wanted to be amongst people who were happy, friendly, who enjoyed life. Do you understand? And he hoped that he could see through that window the same kind of happiness that he experienced and he had lived in Berlin. He hoped to see Berlin through that window, gentlemen. So, here we bring this to an end.